Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. Keith, another win.
Another win.
We're here to talk about it.
Oh, man. That was a fun game. I mean, it was stressful and it was crazy and it was all sorts of like, what? But then at the end, you got it. It would have been impossible to not be entertained by that game. That was so much fun.
Oh, man. I mean, it was entertaining, but shoot, Keith. I mean, can we? Apparently not. We cannot win a going away game where we just kind of put teams away in the first half and then kind of pull away in the second half and everyone goes home happy. We did our thing on offense. The defense was awesome. So far, the offense has just been lights out.
Did you just say the defense was awesome? Because it wasn't.
We could be. I know. I mean, we could be. It's like, could it be? Yeah. I mean, we were up like 30-15 and 32-15, and then we allowed them to come back. That proverbial third and fourth quarter prevent defense kicks in. We let them score. We then, have a couple of 3 and outs on offense, just kind of make it interesting. Why not, And then it comes down to a last Russell Wilson drive against a last Dak Prescott drive, and Russell Wilson wins the day. And somehow the Seahawks continue to kind of be this team for at least the second year in a row, if not the last decade. We've just kind of been that team that wins close games.
Yep. And everyone keeps saying that it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. Like there's too much variability in one-score games. And yet, under Pete Carroll, the Seahawks have been the better end on the one-score games consistently every single year.
Yeah. Well, when you have Russell Wilson throwing the game-winning drive touchdowns, he's got 30 some odd of those in his career.
That certainly helps, doesn't it? Leads
all quarterbacks since 2012, since he's been in the league. It does certainly help, yes. So let's put off the Dallas game for just a minute and get into kind of the comings and goings of this week. I know that you wanted to talk about some injury stuff, and let's get to that in just a second. But I want to talk about this COVID outbreak. The first time we've really had to talk about COVID-19 so far in the league year since the game started. And the Titans players have started to test positive along with some of their personnel as well. So I think Saturday was their defensive linebacker coach turned out positive Saturday morning before the team traveled. He stayed back. The team went ahead and flew to the Vikings, Minnesota. They played the game. They came back yesterday, started testing protocols, and some positive tests came back. And apparently those tests have been reaffirmed and now are truly positive. And so that may end up possibly affecting the Seahawks game in 12 days against the Minnesota Vikings.
Absolutely.
And so we're just going to have to monitor that. So they've put 3 players in the protocol, and then 5 of their coaching staff in isolation as well. And then both teams, Minnesota and the Titans, need to remain away from the practice facilities until at least Saturday, which puts their weekend game. I think the Titans are playing, Pittsburgh. Puts that game into jeopardy. Minnesota has not yet had confirmation of any positive tests, which is awesome. Maybe this thing is contained. So we'll see what happens. But if it takes a few days for kind of COVID to show up and test after you've been infected. So I don't know if the Vikings are completely out of the woods yet. It'll just be something to watch. No, that could have an impact in a few weeks.
Well, I mean, we're only to Tuesday, and the game was on Sunday, so we were only a couple days out. You would expect to see the first positive test coming in on Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
And
Well, especially since the Titans, maybe the coach transmitted that to the other players. I'm just speculating, but that seems reasonable.
mm-hmm.
He was tested positive on Saturday morning. And so that now has given them time to have it. And now it may have been transmitted by virtue of asymptomatic carriers, unbeknownst to them, it just happened.
Yeah, and so it's going to be interesting to see what the league does with this and where this goes, because one of the things that they talked about when they said, okay, we're going to play and here's under the conditions and all that, is they said, we're going to have positive tests. The key is, can our testing protocol catch it, keep the number down, stop massive outbreaks from happening? And do we have, can we contain it when we have them? Well, guess what? Now you've got it. Now we get to test it. And if a whole bunch of the Titans end up not being able to play for a couple of weeks, we've got a problem. And if a whole bunch of Vikings end up not being able to play for a couple of weeks, that makes it an even bigger problem. But if the Vikings end up in the clear with this, and then the league's in good shape to continue, to keep going and doing its thing. But the key here is containment, right? There's been people that have been infected. Can we keep that number to be exactly what it is right now and not let it go up? Because if that stays down, if it stays where it is, we'll continue on with the year and it will be like it never happened. If the number starts to jump because the Vikings got it and it's being spread around by other teams and whatnot, the season actually could come in jeopardy here in a week or two.
I do have to say, though, it seems like from an outside observer that the league really did jump on this quickly.
It does, yes.
It was transparent. They didn't hide the fact that they had players test positive. They came right out with it, even if it looked like it may have been false positives, because there were just so many in a cluster really close together. That's what happened the last time this sort of positive thing happened, but it was, again, reaffirmed. So good luck to those guys. Good luck to the team. Good luck to the Vikings. All around, you just don't want to see that to happen to any team. Obviously, it puts everything in jeopardy. So there's that. But it hopefully is what you described, kind of a contained situation at this point. The team can isolate that situation. Maybe the Titans are talking about Monday or Tuesday being a viable option to play that game against Pittsburgh for the Titans, and maybe that is the solution, and that gets us forward and allows the rest of the league to continue as scheduled. So we'll see what happens. It's just something to be monitoring. Couple of transactions today on the Seahawks front. Seattle waived linebacker DeAndre Walker, who saw a couple of snaps in his 3 weeks with the team. And Seattle protects linebacker Shaquem Griffin and Stephon Sullivan on the practice squad this week. That's the second time. I think it's the second time for both, right?
Yep.
Was Stephon Sullivan protected last week as well?
I believe he was.
Those are the two times that Seahawks can protect those particular two players at this point. So something's got to give in the future. Now, we know, we talked right before the show, that Shaquem Griffin has already been selected to come up onto the Seahawks roster by Pete Carroll. He came out in the news conference on Monday and said as much. And so this move seems to be kind of just a preliminary transition move to get him back on the roster. Mm-hmm. And not sure what's going on with Stephon Sullivan. They must be hearing some grumblings out there that a team is looking at him as a possible add to their 53, so they're protecting him.
Yep, and they're just trying to wait on any decision with him and basically, wait another week and see what goes on with the guys they have on the roster and try and make any decisions as late as possible with that. But with Griffin, he's coming up. The Pete Carroll came out and said they really liked what he did. He was all over the place. He was one of the few guys who actually got upfield and got some pressure and
in only one series, really. I mean, he played 17 snaps on the defense.
Mm-hmm.
So not a huge sample.
I think he only had
sample.
I think he only had 4 pass rush attempts in that, and he got reasonable pressure on
2 pressures and a hit. Yeah.
So, that's the type of thing this team needed, and for him to come in and provide a boost to the pass rush when the team was desperate for it was great to see. And he's going to get more playing time. He's going to get an opportunity to do just that, and then they're going to carve out a role for him, according to Pete Carroll. So,
according to Pete Carroll, he earned it.
Yep,
and I agree. Mm-hmm. So the other interesting little tidbit is Seattle's bringing in free safety Demarius Randall, former first-round pick in 2015, 5'11", 196. He's a free safety guy, but he's been primarily playing the right and left cornerback position in his tenure in the NFL with Cleveland and Green Bay. So lots of experience, lots of pretty decent coverage, and a solid tackler. He's kind of scheme diverse. He can play safety as well as outside corner on the boundaries. Mm-hmm. And, with the injuries we've been having in the secondary particularly, it makes sense that the Seahawks would be looking at a guy like Demarius Randall, and then Snacks Harrison was going to get a look by all reports.
He's also going to be in town.
He's not yet scheduled. I have not seen him scheduled to be in. I haven't heard anything since last week.
Last week he was going to visit this week, and he was scheduled to come in this week. We just didn't know when.
Yes.
My guess is that meant Monday. Because that's when there's no players around, and you just bring a guy in, you talk to him.
So do you think he came in, nobody knows about it, nobody talked about it, he's kind of going through the COVID protocol and workouts and just kind of seeing what happens, or what?
Yeah, I mean that's what's typical with.
It's kind of odd for a guy like Bob Candata or somebody like that not to get wind of a guy like that in the practice facility.
How do we know that they didn't get wind of it? Because it was already reported that he was coming, and for him to come in and
there was speculation out there. Oh gosh, I lost my name that I was thinking of. A beat reporter with the Seahawks did say that while Randall was coming in, that Snacks Harrison, they may have changed direction on it slightly because of the current injury situation on the team. And the fact that our interior defensive tackles have been playing so well. Now that's just a beat reporter on Twitter with inconclusive kind of chatter, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. I just don't know. I haven't heard anything specifically with Harrison up beyond last week.
Yeah, he's an interior defensive tackle who's known as a run stuffer. He's not a pass rusher.
And a great one.
But he's a great run stuffer. And for him to, of course he's on the radar for the Seahawks. They need defensive linemen, just all of them.
Straight up.
Yes. And all of the rotation of bringing, their 5-tech guys like Rasheem Green in to play 3-tech against the pass and all of that, that's been thrown out the window because of all the injuries at defensive end, so including Rasheem Green, and so they just need bodies, and to be able to have a really, really good person out there that you can bring in, even if he's not exactly what you need in terms of you need pass rushers. He's still a really good player. You can play him at the 1, you can play him at the 3. And you play him in first and those downs, and you free up Jerron Reed to be much more of a pass rusher, and you're not asking him to play the run as much, and so you're keeping him fresher. He's playing fewer snaps, and he's playing specifically in snaps where he can rush.
He's not getting he's not getting worn down taking double teams on, because that's Snacks Harrison's specialty.
Yep.
All right, let's get the injury stuff out of the way. It's not as bad of news as we thought it might be.
Oh man, coming out of that game, we were coming out of that game. We were worried. This looked like it was going to be a terrible week for it. Let's start with the defensive secondary, since we were just talking about that. So the team was without Dunbar, who tweaked a knee in practice. It's a first-degree sprain, and he is expected to be back, if not this week, then next week. So that's...
Coach did say that he'd have a good chance this week.
Yep.
And that means a lot from coming from Pete Carroll, that essentially means he's probably going to play.
Yep. They also were without Leno Hill, who woke up.
That was a surprise.
It was a big surprise. He basically just woke up with some back pain, and it was on the same side that he had the hip injury last year, which was pretty serious. So he was Leno apparently was really stressing about it, but it was just typical like back spasm kind of thing, and he'll be fine. He should be ready to go this week, and if not, it'll be soon. Like there's no plans whatsoever for him to go on IR or anything like that. It's not deemed a long term.
He should have given me a call like Sunday morning, because I could have told him all about the back spasm thing. I said, hey, dude, chill out. It'll be cool. Just kind of take a couple Advil, soak in the tub, and start moving. Go for a walk around the block before the game. You'll be good.
So, and then the rough one of all the secondary was, having the Jamal Adams. He's like the superstar back there. Pull up with a groin injury and have to leave the game, not come back. Pete Carroll.
Yeah, when he grabbed that groin, I was like, oh no, dude, no.
Yep.
And
Pete,
so, but.
I would say Pete Carroll says it's a grade 1 strain. He's going to be out. Probably not going to play this next week, but it's not a long-term thing. It's something he'll be back from in a couple of weeks, which is like, oh my God, thank goodness.
Because those groin strains can last. I mean, if you've ever had even a grade 1, you can keep tweaking it like over and over again if you move the wrong way.
It's that's how it's like a hamstring. Right? Yeah. If you have a hamstring injury, like you feel better, you go out and you run on it, and then it just like twinges, and now you're back where you were, and you can wait it out.
So they'll be very careful with this one, especially playing the Miami Dolphins this week. I would imagine Jamal Adams will be a healthy or not healthy scratch this weekend.
But if you think about it, right, that's
a lot of the secondary.
That's 3 of the secondary guys right there. And you've got Blair, who was already placed on IR after having ACL injury the week before.
So the strength of the team, in week 1, Keith, I kid you not, we talked about it, is all of a sudden the weakest link on the defense.
No, it's not. The defensive line is still the weakest link. But
I don't know. I mean, look at the pass numbers that we've been.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad. Like it was bad.
Anyway, we'll talk about that too.
I mean, we can get into that, but at the end of the game, I mean, who was the guy who made the game-sealing interception in the end zone as time was expiring, right?
It was the guy that I talked about in the offseason as being one of the guys I thought maybe the Seahawks would look at keeping over some of the other guys because he's an outside corner guy, and if they developed somebody like that on the roster, it would be good for the long-term success. It
was Neal who was playing safety.
Yeah.
He was playing safety because, well, who else was left? I mean, they had reached a point where they had pulled Ugo Amadi out of the slot job and was having him play safety, but then they were pushing him back to the slot, moving him back to safety, and depending on formations and stuff. So they were, moving him around, and Ugo Amadi played well. I just want to straighten
by all indications too, not just the interception for Ryan Neal, but Ryan Neal took, I've got it written down here. Hold on. Do I? God, I thought I wrote it down. I think Ryan Neal ended up having like 23 snaps on defense. So, and in those snaps, I think Pro Football Focus had him in a fairly positive grade for the game.
I mean, considering he was a guy that got called up from the practice squad the day before the game, I mean, that's a pretty impactful, presence
out there,
and he played pretty well. So, but yeah, I mean, they were down to playing a guy that had been on the practice squad 24 hours before game time at the end of the game. That's how thin the secondary was.
Plus Shaquem Griffin, he's running around being a spy on Dak Prescott, not necessarily rushing the passer, but kind of playing the linebacker role even for the Seahawks, because we had another injury to Jordan Brooks.
Yep, he rolled an ankle.
Or a knee or whatever it was, right?
I thought it was an ankle.
I think he had a knee. That was a sprained knee. Anyway, Jordan Brooks is day-to-day. It's not like it's a long-term thing, or they probably put him on IR for 3 weeks or whatever. It's day-to-day, quote-unquote, just like all the other injuries. But given the injuries and given the opponent this week, they may elect to rest some of these guys. So Jordan Brooks, we had Damian Lewis, who went down early. He only had 4 or 5 snaps, and then he went down on the first drive.
Yep.
Sprained ankle. Thankfully, it wasn't a high ankle sprain, which would have been devastating. I mean, they would have lost him for 5, 6, 7 weeks. Nope. Now they look like he might even play this week.
He might,
which is great news.
Although I'll
for the
say
Seahawks.
Jordan Simmons came in.
Simmons played good.
Played well in that spot. Which, you know what? A couple of years ago, Jordan Simmons came in and played in an injury reserve role and played really well, and then got hurt. And then last year he was on IR all year because he'd been hurt. But when healthy, he's been good. I think that is one of those things that's kind of lost about Simmons, is that people think, oh, who is he? He's like, guy that just made the team and we don't really know much about. No, when healthy, he's been good. He just hasn't been healthy that much. Right now he's healthy. He played well. So
we have one more injury, and then let's talk about the offensive line. So Chris Carson has that sprained knee on that really stupid freaking Tristan Hill gator roll on him with it, twisted his knee up. I mean, that was about as intentional as you can get on film.
It was absolutely.
Now I don't know what's in the man's heart and what's in his mind. I know that his coach came out and tried to defend him. Okay, fine, go ahead and defend your player. Whatever, dude, go look at the film. I'll just point you back to the film because it was stupid. I mean, it was unnecessary. He was already going to be down, and he purposefully rolled him to try to get him out of the game. I don't even know any other interpretation. Chris Carson, though,
he absolutely made an intentional move to try and create an injury. If he's not fined incredible large amounts of money and suspended, I
agree with that take.
I am going to be.
I'd say 4 games livid. For sure, and like $200,000.
And I got to tell you, Pete Carroll is going to be mad about that one, because this is him coming out, and like this is the quote from him. He goes, "I was really pissed about that one. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I was pissed because that guy hurt him."
Yeah, no, you don't hear Pete talk like that very often. Right?
That's from Pete Carroll, and I'm just like, and that wasn't just like right after the game when he's just like, he's pumped up and everything. No, that was the next day, and he had 24 hours to sit with that.
And Keith, that Chris Carson has had some injuries. I mean, he's had an injured knee before. He's had the hip thing. So when that happened, my worst case scenario popped into my brain, and I'm thinking we lost Chris Carson for the freaking year over that stupid crap. And it turns out, yes, in fact, he does have a sprained knee, but it's not. It's a grade 1 sprain, and I think it's an MCL type thing. So it's a day-to-day or a week-to-week type of thing.
The MCL will heal itself. You don't need surgery for it. It's grade 1, which means it's minor, so it'll heal faster. He's probably going to be out 2 weeks.
And then you might as well keep him out to past the bye, so just to be on the safe side or whatever. I mean, you got Carlos Hyde. Let's ride Carlos Hyde for a while.
Well, and not only that, but you've got DJ Dallas, which was one of the more impressive players.
Let's go let DJ Dallas go back to Miami and kick some ass.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
And honestly, I mean, this is the advantage of having a really deep running back room, because they're going to get Carson back, which is awesome, but he gets to take a couple of weeks off and heal, but they can lean on Carlos Hyde and DJ Dallas.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, and they should in this game. Now we'll talk about plenty about the Miami Dolphin team and the game coming up, but I'm telling you what, Miami has a really hard time stopping the run, and they don't look physical at all. Offensive lines are kind of making large, substantial holes. Their secondary is bad too, so you can throw on them. But
I seem to remember somebody on this show being really high on the Miami Dolphins.
Miami Dolphins had a chance. If you looked at all the now, if we had gone through regular preseason and then had that prediction show, I probably would have changed my tune a little bit. But but you look at the Dolphins roster, just on paper, it looked like they had a chance to be significantly better than they were last year. And it turns out not so much. And we'll talk about all Let's talk about the offensive line. I thought I'd give you a really nice shot to come in and talk about the offensive line a little bit, because there's a lot of things to be optimistic about with this line. I'll just give you a couple of stats. In this last game, Russell Wilson had an average of 3.41 seconds to throw the ball, the longest in the NFL in week 3. And overall, Seattle's up on that average to 2.92 seconds per drop back for Russell Wilson, second in the NFL, up from 2.71 average in 2019. And then we have less penalties too. In game 1, we had 4 penalties, which was an outlier maybe, because in game 2 we had 2 penalties. In game 3 we had 2. It looks like the offense is pushing guys out of the way to run the ball and is keeping Russell Wilson fairly protected so that he can have as much time as he really needs to get guys wide open and throw the ball around. So everyone seemed to have stepped up this year.
Well, I'll tell you
their roles.
That not just in the penalty, but definitely in the penalty goal, Brandon Shell has been a big upgrade over Germain Ifedi at right tackle.
He's just a fighter. Even when he gets out of position, he's fighting. Yeah. He's fighting to get back into position. Yep. I noticed that about him.
He's a high effort guy all over the place, and he's pretty athletic and does some things really well. He's been a nice, pleasant surprise. He's not perfect. I mean, we're not talking about a Pro Bowler, but we're also not talking about the worst right tackle in the league, which is what Germain Ifedi was. Now, got to give the plug to Ifedi at guard in Chicago. He's playing very well. Very, very, very well. So it's not personal. He just wasn't a tackle. He's a guard. And Lewis has been outstanding. I mean, okay, so Lewis has some low light reel plays with some really bad penalties, and a couple of sacks he's given up where he just got fooled, especially week 1 against Grady Jarrett. But on a play-to-play, if you start looking over the bulk of the snaps that he's played, he's been very good.
And improving since that first game.
Yeah. And so him getting hurt was that was so disappointing, because he's just been such a nice bright spot for the team. But then Jordan Simmons came in and played well. One guy whose name you don't hear on game day is Ethan Posick. Why do you not hear his name on game day? Because he does his job well.
He's not making any mistakes.
He's doing what he needs to do.
He's shown some athleticism from the center position that I had not seen him show from the guard position. And I got to tell you, that center position for him is just kind of a natural. He was drafted at that position.
He was a center his senior year in college. And Tom Cable goes, nope, he's going to be a tackle. And we go, but he was an All-American center. This is who he is. But to see him pull on those running plays and to get out in front of whether it be a screen pass or a couple of Carson's runs to the outside, and have Ethan Posick, a 320-pound guy, downfield attacking linebackers and safeties in the open field. Sight. I mean, it's been impressive. And they could never do that when Justin Britt was there. I mean, that's not who he was. He's a guy who blocks the guy right in front of him.
Justin Britt operated in a box. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it just adds up flexibility. Mike Lupati's been okay, but he's
got a great Pro Football Focus grade right behind Dwayne Brown.
So I mean, he's been okay. He's been better than last year, which is
it helps when you're surrounded by competence.
It does. It really does.
Just like the
Joey
Lewis
Hunt
thing.
Next to you.
Just like Shell on the outside over there, he's got one of the best rookie guards in the entire league. One of the best guards, period, in the league now with Damian Lewis next to him. That really does help.
It does.
To have a guy that really you can trust next to you.
Well, if you go back to the week 1, like my comment was that they made a lot of mistakes, but the mistakes were not physical so much as they were communication, which means it was fixable. And then if you look what happened last week and this week, those same mistakes didn't happen. They've been better because their communication is better. And this is what's going to happen as this team continues to mature as a unit, is that communication is going to come more naturally, and they're just going to continue to play well together. So they do need to get Lewis back from injury. Mike Lupati actually got hurt, was out for a while, came back. In his stead was Jamarco Jones. So they had both backup guards in at that point. Jones played well too. And then, Dwayne Brown's Dwayne Brown on the outside. He might not be young, but he's still a very good player. What you have is a competent offensive line, which Russell Wilson hasn't had since 2013, right? Ever since they traded Max Unger, he has not had a competent offensive line in front of him. Now he does. I mean, there were some of those plays in the game on Sunday where he had like a half an hour back there to throw the ball and could not find anyone open. But he had lots of time.
Yeah, he had 4 or 5 plays, or no, he had 8 plays with over 4 seconds or 4.5 seconds of time.
That's crazy.
And was 7 of 8 for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns in those plays.
Yeah. I mean, it says something about, the way that they were trying to get people open or get people deep, and the ways Dallas was covering it and all of that. Because it's not like he was trying to hold on to that ball. He wanted to get rid of it, but no one was open. But he had the time. And that was what was key. He had the time.
And we haven't been able to say that.
No.
Like, I don't remember the last time we've been able to say that in any game, in any year. Like, this is a first. I'm not used to this at all. I could get used to it, though, because to see Russell Wilson have time, it's unfair to defenses, because it's so lopsided as far as the talent level. Russell Wilson is just killing people. All right, so as good as the offense have been, and we'll talk about some individual performances and individual players as we kind of move through this, but I thought I'd just throw up the defense. Excuse the pun.
The throw up the defense. That's what the defense did. They threw up all game.
Oh, it's crazy. So when you look at the eye test, you don't look at any of the stats, just kind of a feel. You watch the game, you feel like the defense is playing okay. They're making some plays. They're stopping the run pretty effectively, actually. Mm-hmm. And then occasionally you'll get a little bit of a blitz going, or you'll get some pressure, and maybe you'll force a 3 and out. But right now, teams are completing 50% of third downs against the Seahawks. And also their red zone percentage is not very good as well. So it's and that's the good stuff, right? That's the good part. And then the bad part is the Seattle defense is the only team to ever allow more than 1,200 yards passing through 3 games, and the second NFL most yards overall in history at 1,492 yards, second only to the 2019 lowly Miami Dolphins that had 6 more yards given up.
So they're 6 yards away from being the NFL's worst defense ever.
Of all time
through 3 games.
Three games.
Part of that is because Russell Wilson is insane, and this offense is putting up points like crazy
in the first half. Yeah,
and so teams are. And they're doing it early in games. So they're getting these leads, and they're forcing teams to throw the ball and just go for chunk plays and do all those things. Because teams are attacking. There's no attempt to run for the most part. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of patience. And teams are just look at the number of throws in each of the 3 games. It's been crazy.
It has been crazy. Well, let me just give you this. So this isn't like 3 game stats. This is just the stats against the Cowboys. Seahawks have allowed 9 pass plays against the Cowboys of 20 or more yards, including 3 touchdowns of 40 or more yards. Griffin on one drive gave up a 52-yard reception to Gallup, and then a 42-yard score to Wilson.
God, that was a terrible
for almost the
him.
entire drive. He was the victim.
He looked bad at times.
Oh, dude, and it's it's tough, because then you have outliers like Ugo Amadi, who had a great game, 8 tackles, a tackle for loss. stop on a 2-point conversion, a couple of pass breakups on
couple
third
big,
downs to kill drives.
Pass
right?
breakups.
But then you've got Quentin Dunbar, Marquise Blair, Leno Hill out versus Dallas. You've got Ryan Neal that kind of had to come in off the practice squad and step up and actually made a play. Quem Griffin, like I said, was kind of all over. He's not kind of a defensive back guy, but his brother, though, had those huge mistakes, but then also had an interception later on, which was good. But the consistency that I'm seeing is all over the place on the defense. It's just crazy. It's like they'll have a great play and then they'll have 3 bad ones, and they'll have a good, decent play, and they'll stop somebody on third drive, and then they'll allow 4 third down conversions in a row on a 75-yard drive that just kills them. And so it's not sustainable.
It's rough because it's one thing for the bend and don't break where you give up third down completions, but you don't give up any big plays, and eventually the other team makes a mistake and their drive stalls. That's the bend but don't break thing. The problem with this defense is that it's bending and breaking. It's giving up those.
And the only reason we're winning is because we're outscoring teams. I mean, that's how you win in the NFL. I get it, but we're having to outscore teams by a historic effort by our quarterback in order to beat teams. That's my point.
Yeah. And as I was saying, those two things are a little bit related because with Wilson putting up points, other teams are forcing the issue, and that is what it is. But
let's break that down a little bit. I mean, how real is that? How real is that? The defense is only so bad because the offense is just so good.
Well, no, I mean they're
as
bad.
Opposed to
they're bad, but you look at some of the yards that they give up. Teams don't want to throw the ball 51 times a game, right? That's
the only
never
thing
the
that's
game
saving
plan.
this defense right now is turnovers. We're +4 on the turnover ratio, and we had 3 turnovers against Dallas. Plus, we had the safety.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sort of work by the defense, I get and I accept, and I will take that all day because that's really the game-changing kind of plays that keep you in games and then help you win games. But everything else is just garbage right now.
Well, they're stopping the run, which is good. They're forcing teams to throw it, and then teams are throwing it. And then Wilson's basically saying, you're not going to run it anyway, by putting up all those points. And so teams are, like I said, you never go into a game with the game plan to be to throw it 50, 55 times. And that's what teams are doing against Seattle by necessity. And so a lot of those yards end up showing up because of game script. Now, it would be nice if that didn't happen, or they could get a stop here or there and get off the field, which is what they need to do. So I'm not trying to say that they've been good in any way because they haven't, but a lot of the extremeness of those stats is, I don't want to say a lot, but a good chunk of it is it's built around the game script of the Seahawks jumping out to an early lead.
Yeah,
and looking
I disagree with you in a sense that Seattle has never been game scripted to allow big chunk pass plays. Pete Carroll would hate that.
No, that's not what I mean. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about.
Yeah, but you said a good chunk of the yardage we're allowing. I would argue that a big chunk of the yardage we're allowing is that big chunk play. I mean, if you take a look at all those plays, that's not what accumulated to almost 300 yards of Dallas's offense.
But that's not what I was saying.
Plays over 20 yards.
Is if you look at this game, right? If it had been a close game, or if Dallas had been slightly ahead, how many times are they forcing the ball deep like that? They're not. They're not taking those chances. They're not throwing the deep. They're taking what the defense gives them. They're
Which would you rather have? Would you rather have the old playbook scenario where Seattle plays close games the entire way and our defense is fairly tight, but our offense is less dynamic?
Oh, this is way more fun.
Or would you rather win with an offense?
This is way more fun.
Put up, 15 or 20 points on a team, and then we let them come back.
This is more fun. It's more fun and more entertaining this way. Honestly,
is it a Super Bowl winning formula? Could it be?
I mean, it has been in the past. The Saints won a Super Bowl this way.
Does the defense have enough potential to get better?
Yes.
So talk to me about that a little bit. What do you think?
I see Alton Robinson and what he did on Sunday as such a bright spot and such a source of hope. because the one thing that this defense desperately needs is a pass rusher that can consistently generate pressure. And you know what Alton Robinson did on Sunday? He beat offensive tackles around the corner and made Des Bryant
He had a couple of
uncomfortable.
tackles for loss. He had a couple of close. He had
He
a
had
close
a big sack
one, and then he had a sack.
He had a big sack at the end.
He had a big sack with 16 seconds left. That wasn't just a big sack. That was a play of the game, basically.
Yeah.
That forced the next play into an interception.
Yep. And so he was such a bright spot and looked so good. And I think as he continues to develop and gets more playing time and gets more experience and all that, he's going to just continue to get better and continue to.
And that's with Darrell Taylor sitting on the bench, waiting for his leg to heal up.
He's not even on the bench. He's in the locker room still. He's
on
injured
what I'm saying
reserve.
is that he could come back in this year and have an effect as well. So Seattle could get better just by virtue of having a guy come back that we've never had yet.
Yeah, and Alton Robinson was playing, and he'd never played this year. And he
what
looked
in the
good.
heck was going on with Seattle's coaching staff that made the decision to sit him the first 2 weeks? We've seen this before. This is not
It happened
brand
last
new movie.
year too. No,
And this happened with Puna Ford the year before.
Puna Ford the year before, Marquise Blair and Ugo Amadi last year, and this year it's Alton Robinson. They want to play the veterans. They don't want to deal with rookie mistakes and that kind of stuff.
Even on a team that is desperate for pass rush.
Well, and I think the severity of the issue was unexpected. I think they knew they weren't going to be great at rushing the passer. I didn't think they realized they were going to be historically bad.
I think what got them out of whack was Benson Mayoa playing 90% of the snaps.
Oh yeah, because
that was the line that they couldn't cross.
You can't have that. Well, and that's Bruce Irvin's injury. Rearing its head right there, because they really expected Bruce Irvin to be that guy. I mean, he's going to play strong side linebacker, in the base, but they're going to play a lot of nickel, and he was going to come up and play that rush end, which he does well. And then when he had that injury, it's like, now there's nothing. You don't have anything behind him, because they were trying to replace Jadeveon Clowney with 4 guys, right? So instead of having 1 guy, you're going to have 4, right? You're going to have Alton Robinson, Benson Mayoa, Bruce Irvin, and Darrell Taylor. Well, Taylor's foot is still injured, so he's on the PUP. Irvin, tore his ACL. He's on IR. That leaves Mayoa and Alton Robinson. And so now you're replacing, guy who with all pro credentials with a 5th round draft pick and a mildly successful rotational guy, right? I mean, he's had some sacks, but he's a guy that you want playing 30% of your snaps, not 90% of your snaps.
Correct.
So the situation, they thought they had a formula, and on paper they had a formula, but everything is kind of blown up in their face. A little bit with the
happen
injuries.
when you have a weak spot in your defense sometimes. When that weak spot is then exposed by virtue of injury or underperformance or whatever, it really does come back to bite you, especially given the idea that we knew all along, and so did they, that pass rush was going to be preeminent as far as needing to fix it and addressing it and solving it, and they did none of it.
Well, and part of the problem,
so it'll be interesting.
Part of the problem was that the game plan for this week included a lot of Jordan Brooks pass rushing, because he was stepping into the Bruce Irvin role as a strong side linebacker, come up and rush the passer. Maybe not in the same ratio and all of that as Irvin did, but his athleticism, he's just a crazy athlete. Was going to win. I think
that points to the fact that we did blitz less than we had been in the first 2 games against Dallas, which may be the formula that they go forward with a little bit more.
A little less blitzing.
Especially Jamal Adams is out now. Jordan Brooks is going to be out for a little while. Maybe they play a little bit more standard 4-man rush fronts and go with Ugo Amadi, who's playing well in the slot, and just kind of roll with that for a while, see what happens. So let's talk about some other players. So I can't go very far into this show without talking about Russell Wilson, dude. Like, we're talking historic levels of quarterback play here, and it's really hard to put into words.
He has 14 touchdowns in 12 quarters, which is an NFL record. The record was set 2 years ago by Mahomes, who had 13 in the first game in the team's first 3 games. Before that, the record was 11, set by Drew Brees, I think in like 2005.
And he should have had at least one more.
Yeah. And so you look at that. So he is, not only does he have the record because he was better than Mahomes, but he's 3 better than second place. And it's not like, 3 better when you're talking about 120. No, it's 3 better when you're talking about 14. So just in that's how good he's been. He has just been lights out, crazy good.
He's been so good, Keith, that he went 27 of 40 for 315 yards and 5 touchdowns, and had a passer rating that actually dropped his passer rating for the year down a little bit because it was only 130.7.
Yeah. He threw 5 touchdowns,
absurd.
5 touchdowns and no interceptions, and his passer rating went down. That's how good he's been. Now in this game, he was a little off.
It seemed like it, especially in the first half.
In early in the second half, he was throwing the ball low, throwing some balls that were really tough to catch,
and
throwing the ball down,
range. Right.
And he was definitely a little out of sync at times.
What do you think that's from? I mean, I'm just kind of curious because I've thrown the ball around in baseball and football, and if you think about things too much, you kind of get off sometimes. You can overcompensate, you can underthrow if you're worried about somebody else catching it or paying attention or whatever. It's just, there's a lot of things that go into throwing a ball. It seems like it should be really easy, but if you start to overthink, certain things can happen with your mechanics, and that's kind of what I saw.
Yeah, I mean, Wilson's got unique mechanics in terms of his throw. He's very over the top compared to most throwers. His baseball background is like very apparent in his throwing motion. And earlier in his career, when he missed high. And you could tell that was what one of the things that the coaches have worked with him on is, don't change your motion, but if you're going to miss low. And so there are times when it seems like he's just pulling the ball toward the ground. And that's what was going on is he's just there and he's thinking and he's like, don't sail it. Cause that's what's been drilled into his head.
Well, he wants to be, it shows, I think, that he's looking for perfection. He's looking, he's hunting, like out there when he's playing. He's gone from just being a guy, being a player, being a very good quarterback, very good. But there's a shift. There's some sort of mental shift that's going on with him right now where he's hunting, and the offensive line performance has allowed him to do more of this, where he's checking down, he's going through all his progressions, and, which he's never had time to, like, consistently. He's always been, having to rush stuff or move clear out of the pocket and run. Seeing less of that this year. It's a fantastic thing, but you're right. He was off just a little bit. And these are minor critiques. Trust me. But this is not even an issue.
No,
it's just one of those deals you notice.
The thing is, the thing that makes this incredible is this was an off game for him. This was an off game for him. He threw 5 touchdowns, no interceptions.
6.
5.5 touchdowns. I'm not gonna go.
What was up with DK Metcalf?
I'm not gonna go with
I want to talk about it. I want DK Metcalf on this show. That fumble through the end zone for a touchback was inexcusable, and it was a bad play, and it took points off the board in a league where you don't take points off the board because every game is close, especially the way the Seahawks play. And that was tough. Now, I love DK Metcalf. I'm going to write him for half a second here, but that's it because he came back and caught a winning touchdown. But that play, though, will forever stick in his brain.
I hope so.
And it will never happen again.
It better not.
That was Russell Wilson's, well, It was the first touchdown, right?
Second. I think it was second. First
And,
one, first
but
one went to...
it would have accumulated to 6 touchdowns for Russell Wilson in this game because there was nothing preventing him from completing any of the other touchdowns. That was a gimme that just went away.
Metcalf was wide open. Wilson laid it in there perfectly. Metcalf secured the ball.
I will argue that was the best throw that Russell Wilson ever made.
No.
If you look at the way that Russell Wilson gunned that sucker, like 60-something yards in the air on a floater straight down into Metcalf's hands. Dude, if that was a touchdown and counted, that would have gone down as one of the greatest touchdown throws of all time.
Metcalf had to slow down a little bit, which doesn't have anything to do with how the play ended up. But I'll give you that the 4th and 5 play for a touchdown a couple of weeks ago was a better throw because it was just as floaty and it hit Metcalf perfectly in stride.
No, I agree.
There was no
You're
slowing. But it was such a great play, and
it was a great play.
And Wilson floated it in there, and I think Metcalf, when he caught the ball and he realized that he had 10 yards on the guy, he expected that everyone was going to pull up and he was just going to, walk into the end zone. The play was over. But the other guy didn't pull up. This is the NFL, right? And he plays for the Seahawks. And I know he wasn't here, but how many times did we see Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor tomahawk the ball away from someone at the 1-yard line when it looked like an obvious touchdown? We've seen that on the other side, and guys got to learn. Kids got to learn. And honestly, I don't think he'll ever forget that. He better not ever do it again.
When you're berated by your own quarterback and your head coach in front of other players, you'll never forget that.
But the thing is,
and he was. I mean, they treat him good because he's a good kid.
He is a great kid.
That was an example that I don't believe that his coach or his quarterback wanted him to ever forget, and they made sure. But
then look what happened. I was really I felt really bad for him because I was looking at this and I'm like, okay, this kid is. He made that play, and then after that play, he kind of disappeared, and it was just struggled, and just it was almost like he was mentally out of it a little bit because he just disappeared from the game plan and wasn't getting open and all of that. And then when the Cowboys came back and took the lead, and you're like, okay, that drop is now officially hurt this team. You can't argue against it. Then they come back, and Wilson finds Metcalf on 3rd down, big 3rd and 4, and they throw
29-yard touchdown.
Yep, 29-yard touch. He's there battling physical contact, and makes the catch anyways, touchdown, and it's just like a redemption catch for him because
Russell Wilson's 33rd game-winning drive. You don't know it until the defense makes a stop, but that's the difference maker right there.
Yep.
And that adds up to 12 receptions, 297 yards, and 3 touchdowns through 3 games for DK Metcalf. And there's so much more. There's so much more that he could give you. He could probably have an additional 100 yards if he catches everything that's come to him this year. He's had some drops. Obviously, he's probably the receiver that ends up with the most drops just by virtue of the routes and the passes that he tries to get. But he's leaving some stuff out there.
He's had a couple of bad drops, which he also had last year. He had a couple of bad drops.
But nonetheless,
if you look at it, those are concentration drops.
12 receptions for 300 yards and 3 TDs over the whole year. Mm-hmm. My goodness, Keith, we're talking.
That's only 3 games.
All pro level.
Yeah.
And with the mistakes, it's just one of those things where you're hoping you'll have growth in that area, because these are more mental mistakes than they are physical mistakes by all accounts.
Yeah. And so you have, that's the thing. They're concentration mistakes. When he drops the ball, when he does those things, they're not physical mistakes. When you're evaluating players, especially pre-draft and all of that, and you see drops, are they mental drops or are they physical drops? Because if a guy has stone hands, he'll always have stone hands. He'll never learn to catch the ball. But if a guy who's turning his head and looking downfield before he secures the ball, you can coach guys to get better at that and not make those concentration mistakes.
We had a receiver in our past, Keith, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name, and maybe you could. The receiver that we had during our Super Bowl run in 2005, he had in fact, I believe that he had a drop in the Super Bowl too. And I'm wondering if you can remember the receiver that I'm talking about. But he used to have the drops. He had them pretty good. I can't remember his name.
So the receivers that were big then were Bobby Ingram and Darrell Jackson.
Maybe it was Darrell Jackson. Yeah, Darrell Jackson, where he was inclined to drop the ball now and again and kill drives and all that kind of stuff. Frustrating. Anyway, Lockett doesn't have that problem though. 9 catches, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns, all in the first half.
Three touchdowns in one half.
Metcalf might look like the number one wide receiver, but Lockett is the number one.
Statistically, Lockett's the number one. And the thing is, you can tell by the way teams are scheming, the way they roll their safeties and the way they do things. They are scared of Metcalf, and rightfully so, because the kid's freaking dominant. But when they roll their safeties to Metcalf, you're leaving yourself open to Tyler Lockett, who's one of the best receivers in the NFL. And I know that sounds homerish because you're like, oh, how does he compare to guys like, Julian Jones and what, blah, blah, blah. Look statistically, just on a statistical nature, he is right there with all the other top receivers. He catches everything thrown at him. He gets behind the defense.
He has the most separation in the NFL. I mean, I don't even know that stat, but I'm just saying he just does. He
is now what Antonio Brown was 3 or 4 years ago before his mental meltdown. Just not the biggest guy, but fast, quick,
savvy,
dominant, and he is
perfect weapon for Russell Wilson.
Oh yeah, the two of them work great together. I am loving every second of seeing those two guys play together.
What do you think about the Baldwin Wilson combo versus Lockett Wilson?
Well,
which would you rather have?
I'd rather have Lockett Wilson because Lockett's speed, he's a deep threat, and Wilson's the best deep thrower in the game. And I know, again, that sounds homerish, but statistically, he's not only the best deep thrower in the game, he's the best deep thrower in the game by a wide margin, and he's arguably the best deep thrower in the history of the NFL, statistically. I'm not just talking about, comparing it to, what I see. That's statistically. And so Baldwin was great. He was super effective. Perfect for what the Seahawks and Russell Wilson needed at the time because the offensive line was... Okay, I don't want to say that word. This is a family-friendly show. But the offensive line was not good. And so Wilson was often running for his life. And Baldwin was excellent in the scramble drill. And his ability to find ways to present a target for Wilson when Wilson was desperate for one was part of Baldwin's greatness. And so at the time... Baldwin was exactly what Russell Wilson needed. But as far as being a pure complement, Lockett's ability to get deep and win on those long routes, which is what Wilson does well as those deep throws, I think is a better pairing. But man, you're comparing two very, very good players right there. You can't go wrong with either decision. I mean, two very good players.
A couple other players on offense that stepped up. Greg Olsen. I had 5 receptions for 61 yards, clutch fourth down to extend the game-winning drive.
Absolutely.
I think it was his biggest play of the season so far.
Coming back from a week in where he had a drop where the ball hit him in the hands and he tipped it up in the air and it was caught for a pick six. To come back and have such a solid game was nice to see.
Freddie Swain had another decent game, getting third wide receiver snaps, really. 34 snaps on offense, 45%.
What did
to David Moore's 41%, 31. So both third and fourth wide receivers in this game still had quite a few snaps. So they were using a lot of 3 wide receiver sets.
Yeah, so if you combine the two of them, say they split time, I mean, there's going to be 4 wide receiver sets in there, but it basically looks like 60% of your snaps are...
Or 80,
are going to be Right. Well, there's the 4 wide receiver sets, is what I was saying.
Right,
but you're looking at 60% of your snaps are in the 3 wideout sets, and you're giving your rookie half of those. That's a good sign
3
for him. Yeah, and the thing is, he played well. He's responded. He's getting open. He's not as dynamic as some of the other guys, but he's quicker. He's a better slot guy than David Moore. David Moore really needs to line up on the outside, and that's part of it. Is so you don't have to move Lockett in. You can let Swain play on the inside, and so it's been a nice little addition that I kind of didn't expect much from this year, like at all. And he's just played well. He's playing much better than I expected.
So we talked about Alton Robinson already. The one thing I'll point out with Alton Robinson being able to come in is it really helped balance the defensive line overall. Mayoa went back from 90% of the snaps the week before to 63%. Collier at 56%. Demontre Moore at 41%. Alton Robinson at 37%. Brian Monet at 30%. Anthony Rush at 27%. So that's a much more manageable workload for all those players. And, from the eye test, maybe not statistically, but the eye test showed that we played an okay game against Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott really didn't. He threw for a lot of yards, but a lot of those yards
there were a bunch of chunk
ended
plays.
up being empty.
Yeah.
All right.
I will say that you go down that list, and Brian Monet is a 360-pound run stuffer. That's a lot of snaps for that guy, who's your third defensive tackle. Rush and DeMonte Moore are not athletically.
Well, Rush is 350. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was saying, well, him and Moore, those guys aren't athletically gifted either. That's a lot of snaps for those 3 guys that could go to players that have more potential to actually be impactful. And I'm not. I like Monet, and I think Moore and Rush are serviceable. But
well, if you had like a Snacks Harrison come in and take the snaps of Rush and Monet, I wouldn't have any problem with that.
No. Or if you had a defensive end that could rush the passer and not be DeMonte Moore.
Collier looked good.
Collier
looked really solid.
He's never. I don't think he's ever going to be a spectacular guy. He's probably never going to live up to his draft position, but he has greatly improved from last year, and is.
And without him, where would we be?
God,
Green is on the sidelines now. It's like, come on.
Yeah, they'd be. God, this defensive line would be screwed. That's how close they are to just being completely
imploding.
And with all of the injuries at linebacker and in the secondary now, because the back 7 was supposed to be like this great strength of talent and depth that was going to help them overcome the problems on the line. And all that depth is gone right now. And the line's got to hold its own, because the back 7 just don't have the depth that they did when the season started. And so you got to have guys step up. Seeing Collier step up a little bit has helped. Seeing Alton Robinson come in has helped. And seeing Shaquem Griffin come in and play some linebacker where he had to spy Prescott sideline to sideline and just not let him run, and then rush the passer on a few times, and just kind of have that role and that job and do it really well. That was good to see too. There's reason for hope with the defense. They're gonna get guys healthy, right? Everybody except for Irvin and Blair is due to come back. They're gonna get Darrell Taylor at some point. And if Griffin and Robinson continue to develop and continue to make an impact that they didn't in the first couple of weeks because they weren't even on the roster, or they weren't even on the field, then there's hope. There's hope here. They just can't afford any more injuries.
I agree. And they need some confidence building games too. They have faced very decent offenses.
Yeah.
Offenses that you could probably argue will be there at the end, that, in the top 10 or whatever.
Oh yeah, they faced
even though Atlanta's struggling, they're still a great offense.
Yeah, I mean they're struggling, but most of what they're struggling with is coaching. I mean, how do you give up double-digit leads late in the fourth quarter 2 weeks in a row? I mean, this is, and think about it. This is the 28-3 team that lost the Super Bowl after being up 28-3, and then they've given up big leads 2 weeks in a row. They had an early lead against Seattle in week 1, and then of course Seattle ate that and won big. But there's some coaching problems going on there. I was kind of surprised that we rolled into this morning without news of Dan Quinn being replaced. He barely held on to his job last year, and for this start, 0-3 with 2 epic collapses to get them to 0-3. His time as a head coach in Atlanta has got to come to an end soon, unless they turn this around big time.
Yeah, it's a tough deal, the NFL is. All right, so let's all travel to Miami, shall we?
Okay. I wouldn't mind going to Miami this time
I wouldn't mind. Oh, man, I'd give anything for that right now. Seattle, 3-0 against the Miami Dolphins in Miami. Miami is 1-2 losses to Buffalo, where they were actually up with 10 minutes to go in that game. Losses to New England in the first game of the year. So we played New England after they had gone to Miami. And then they won last week against the Jaguars. This team is interesting because I think they're offensively, they're somewhat competent. You look at them, they're well put together. They've got a nice complementary running game with Myles Gaskin actually stepping up. Old University of Washington 7th round 2019 pick is kind of shown up for them, and he's
a guy
been their dynamic runner.
I understand the tread on the tires argument because, man, that guy had a lot of runs in college. But Myles Gaskin was a dynamic player at the collegiate level, and I was surprised that he lasted where he did in the draft. He was a guy that to me looked like, okay, he might have a shorter career because he of the wear and tear in his body and everything, but he looked like a guy that could come in and be impactful for a team. I'm still, obviously, surprised that he dropped. And this is coming from a Coug, not a Husky, at heart. So
he looks like he's put on a little bit of weight, which I think has helped him a little bit run between the tackles. So he's been able to stay on the field for them, which is the key. And they have him working in that way. Even though they've got Howard, who they picked up in free agency, who's developed into their short yardage guy now at this point. But they can run and they can pass the ball. They've got Fitzpatrick. He's not going to be your 400-yard guy, but he could be your 250 to 300-yard guy.
He might be a 400-yard guy against this defense.
He very well could be. He very well could be. I'm not kidding. He probably might, in fact, be. But they lost to the Bills. The Bills finally came back and beat them 31-28. But they were up 21-17 with 10 minutes to go in that game. And Buffalo just needed a little bit more from Allen, and they got it on a couple of drives, and they were able to stop Fitzpatrick on a couple of drives. Yep. And that was the difference in that game. So
Buffalo just needed to wake up. They looked like they were sleepwalking through that parts of that game, and then they woke up, and they're clearly the more talented team, and it showed. But yeah, Miami could have won that game.
Miami could put up anywhere from 20, I think in this game against the Seahawks, anywhere from 24 to 30 points. But, and here's the but, they don't have anything on defense.
Nope.
So they're allowing opposing quarterbacks to complete 72% of their passes and an 8.8 per attempt average. And they also allow folks to run the ball on them pretty effectively. And so I think Seattle's going to have its choice on offense of what it wants to do and exploit. It can run the ball, I think, effectively against this team. This would probably end up being the biggest running game I think Seattle could have, although you could see Russell Wilson throw 350 yards and another 5 touchdowns against this defense as well.
Yeah, the defense there is pretty bad. The offense, has Fitzpatrick at quarterback, which We all know what that means. He'll have great games, and
He'll
then
throw 3 interceptions too.
and then he'll turn around and throw 3 interceptions the next week.
Right.
And so this could be a game where he throws for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they keep it close. This could be a game where he throws for 400 yards, but 3 interceptions, and the Seahawks
and they're all empty.
and
the yards are empty.
And the Seahawks, run away with this and, put up a 50 burger on them. I mean, it could go either way. It comes down to who on defense makes plays, and if they can get those.
Well, I can tell you what right now, the only team that's going to stop the Seattle Seahawks offense against the Miami Dolphins is Seattle.
Yeah.
They're not going to make plays. This is going to be a situation where Seattle can pick up chunk yards. That Russell Wilson should have time to throw and pick his targets and or run the ball effectively when they want to run the ball. I really do honestly believe Seattle can put up 40 plus points on this team, no problem. But Seattle's defense is not constructed well to be able to stop what Miami wants to do either. Their tight ends, especially Gesicki at tight end, is very dynamic. He's gonna probably have 10 catches for 120 yards and a couple touchdowns in this game. Just him. And then Devontae Parker at wide receiver. Again, Myles Gaskin is catching a lot of balls out of the backfield, more than they thought he was just going to be that for them. Turns out he can run between the tackles a little bit more than they probably wanted initially out of him. So he's going to be on the field quite a bit.
Good outside runner too. He's very good.
They do.
In a stretch zone.
And Miami does run a lot of outside zone and also inside zone too, which kind of surprised me. Fitzpatrick will pull the ball down occasionally if he gets frustrated with coverage. He'll pull the ball down and get you yards. He'll extend a drive or two on third down if he's not seeing something. He surprises you because he's 38 years old or whatever, but he can still kind of move around a little bit. So it'll be interesting. It's just one of those games where it's Miami. I mean, you're going to outscore Miami. You're going to win this game if you're Seattle, just on paper and everything we've seen so far. The question becomes, can Seattle use this game as an opportunity to improve defensively? And I think that's what I'm looking for out of this game is, can Seattle stop Miami and prevent them from gaining more than 50% on third down conversions, and red zone rate needs to be below 50% or whatever. Really just have some stops at key moments in this game. I just want to look for small improvements, incremental changes that the Seahawks are doing on defense that gives me hope that it could carry over to the next game and so forth. They could kind of build on it.
Yeah. So how do you see this game ending? Let's go ahead and do the predictions. Give me a prediction for this game.
Well, I honestly see us scoring 45 points. I watched all 3 Miami games, condensed versions, before this show this weekend, and this morning I watched the Jaguars show game. We're going to score points. So the point scoring for Seattle is not going to be the issue. It's, can we stop Miami from scoring consistently? And I believe that we can. Other defenses have been able to stop them and generate some turnovers and generate some 3 and outs and so forth. So I think that, if we hold Miami to like the 24 thing, so 45-24 Seahawks. Yeah.
So if you look at common opponent, which was New England, right? Cam Newton ran all over that defense. He didn't have to throw it because the defense was so bad. They just ran it all the time and kept the ball away from the other team. And defensively,
conversely, it was a low-scoring game.
Yeah, and offensively, they struggled to move the ball against the Patriots. Well, what happened? What did the Seahawks do against the Patriots? Oh, that's right. They put up a ton of points and pretty much moved the ball at will, especially to DK Metcalf, over reigning Defensive Player of the Year. Yes. And who do they have? Who does Miami have that's close to Gilmore? No one.
Well, here's the deal, too.
No one.
And I'm glad you brought this up. So Miami has Byron Jones Okay, but he's been nursing a groin injury since week 2. He was out last week. He's the guy that would cover Metcalf. So if he can't go, it would be Xavier Howard at corner, who Metcalf can exploit all day. That would shift them their new draft pick, Noah, whatever his last name is, Igno Gien, over on Tyler Lockett. That matchup is so favorable for the Seahawks, I can't even begin to tell you. Well, so as long as we can block up front, like Wilson's going to have a field day.
Even if Byron Jones is in there, right? Like Byron Jones is a good player, but what's his, I mean he's a great athlete, but what's his straight line speed? It's not.
Well, it's not going to be at 3.3.
Right? He's a fantastic athlete, which is why a lot of teams thought he would be a safety, a strong safety, because he is so agile for his size and everything. But his straight line speed isn't great.
And again, nursing a groin injury.
Yeah. And
so his lateral quickness is just probably not going to be there. He's probably not going to want to test that.
Yeah. And
in a game fresh back off that.
And now you put a super dynamic athlete like DK Metcalf on him, who can stretch him deep and beat him one-on-one, even if he was healthy.
And Russell Wilson's getting 4 seconds of the throw.
Yeah. Like that's a matchup that, I mean, let's face it. If Gilmore couldn't stop Metcalf, Jones isn't going to. And Lockett's going to eat anybody else on that roster. He's just going to eat them alive. And so I don't see a way for them to.
And we haven't even talked about the impact of our tight ends or running backs out of the backfield or our third or fourth wide receivers. I mean, weapon wise, they have nothing to stop our front 2 guys, let alone everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, they're really going to struggle.
We haven't even talked about the running game. I mean, that's just,
and Miami's a really bad run defense.
Yes.
So,
we're talking, we should be able to pick up 8-9 yards of crack in this game.
Yeah. So the Seahawks are going to score it well. They really are. They're just
leave Dixon at home and bring up another player. How about we do that?
No. Dixon's, he was an all-pro as a rookie. Last year he was middle of the road. This year he's playing at an all-pro level again. You keep him.
All right. So you're saying we might have a 1 or 2 third down.
Yeah.
Or fourth down plays. Yeah. Okay.
A couple.
So how do you feel about it? And then I want to talk about the NFC West just really quick. Since we've been kind of covering that this offseason, maybe we should keep that up a little bit.
I could see the Seahawks just kind of running away with this game early, putting up points. That's forcing Miami to do things they don't want to do, and that's just force the ball downfield with the quarterback that is a dink and dunk guy. And he's going to turn the ball over a bunch because
his mechanics are all over the place too. Still,
they've always been that way.
To this day, he throws off his back foot a lot. He doesn't step forward. He slings it sideways. He puts himself in a position to be intercepted quite a bit, and so we'll see.
And so I foresee this being like a 3 turnover game for the Dolphins, and Wilson putting up 30 some odd points, easy, like 38. And Miami just struggling to put up points. Maybe they'll get some garbage time points and make it 38-24. But, 14 of those points are going to come in garbage time once the game's already over. All
right. So I'll give you the 38-24 and I'll add a defensive touchdown. It'll get me to my 45-24 prediction. How about that?
All right.
So NFC West is an interesting division this year. Obviously, one of the best, if not the very best, in all of football. Seahawks are obviously 3-0. The others are all 2-1. Mm-hmm. Arizona lost to Detroit, which was kind of surprising for me
because Detroit's not been good.
Detroit's not been good, but they were good enough to intercept Murray 3 times, and that was the difference in that game.
Yep.
Arizona lost. The next up is Carolina. They should win that game.
Easy.
The Los Angeles Rams 32, Bills 35. That was as close as you can get to winning that game. The Rams are at the Giants next. We'll see. We'll see what that means. That usually means a win for anybody. So the Rams should take that as well. But the Bills are interesting. They're winning close games, which is it's what Seattle does. So I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. I'm just going to say that the Bills will be interesting. We play the Bills this year. I'm looking forward to that game, actually, at this point in the season.
The Bills are a good team. Nobody wants to give them credit for being a good team because, well, they're the Bills, and also because Allen is their quarterback. But they have a good roster.
Yes.
They are a good team.
But they're allowing lots of yards on defense, and their defense was going to be their strength. So that's the interesting part for me. It's like, what is their defense really all about? And is their offense sustainable? You know, and who have they played? I mean, if you're going to put 35 points up on the Rams, that doesn't really tell me a lot. So San Francisco, they beat the Giants 36-9. It's interesting to watch San Francisco have so many medical problems and still put up that many points on a Giants team.
Did you watch that game?
Shows you how bad the Giants are.
Did you watch that game?
246 total yards against the 49ers.
No,
I did not.
I did. I watched as much of that game as I could tolerate, which was probably 3/4 of it, and then I kept flipping away from it because it was so boring. That was a college level game as far as talent. Neither one of those teams is good. 49ers are better than the Giants, even with all the injuries. Obviously, look at the score, but the Giants are quite possibly like a 2-14 team. Or a 1-15 team. They are bad, and
only worst team is the Jets.
Yeah.
What a suffering fan base right now for those two franchises.
Oh darn. But the 49ers, like,
and then the 49ers get to go to the Eagles, who are now struggling big time.
I mean, and that's what I said after they lost their first game, is that they have their next 5 games were all not just winnable, but they definitely needed to win those. I will say because the only dynamic player they had on offense in that entire game was the rookie, Brandon Ayuk, who showed up like in the third quarter in a big way and pretty much had an entire drive to himself with like 3 catches and a touchdown. And he was really the only thing.
How did Nick Mullins look?
He looked like Nick Mullins, right? Like he did a couple of years ago. He makes some plays.
Just a dink and duck guy, and
for the most part, he's not a special player, but he's not terrible. But Ayuk was clearly the best player on the field when the 49ers offense was on the field, and there was nobody else close, and that was on both sides of the ball. None of the other 49ers that were playing on offense are going to scare anybody unless you're the Jets or Giants. And the Giants were just terrible. Like they're such a bad team. So that was not a fun game to watch just because it was just not good football.
Well, everyone keeps winning though. You know, for the most part. I mean, they're 2-1, all those teams, and then Seahawks. This could be an interesting special year for the Seahawks.
It could be.
It's just lining up.
They got to get that defense. You know, because it is going to come back.
We're ranked 27th DVOA.
Yeah,
on defense.
The defense is bad enough; it's going to bite them a couple of times, and that would be unfortunate.
That would be very unfortunate, especially if it's in a game that Russell Wilson has 350 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, very few mistakes, and our defense is the cause of a loss. That would be heartbreaking.
Yeah. So, looking at, we were talking about the NFC West and just how good all the teams are, because the 49ers were a very, very good team, but they've just lost so many good players to injury. And so they're just playing just this litany of backups, and it's unfortunate. But the whole division is great. To give you an idea of how bad the NFC East is, Dallas is in first place at 1-2, tied with Washington, which is also at 1-2. The other 2 teams are 0-3. Dallas is the only team of the 4 that has looked competent. But their defense obviously isn't very good.
They've got problems.
And it took a historic meltdown by Atlanta a week ago Otherwise, they would be 0-3, right?
True.
That's how bad that. I expect Dallas to run away with that division by being the only team capable of getting close to 8 wins.
Well, I can never take anything away from anybody since we went into the playoffs with 7 wins once. So
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying compared to, you look at the
well, and they had the expectation of being right there at the end with all the other NFC front runners: Green Bay, Saints, Seahawks, 49ers.
Well, and the Eagles expected to be there too, but what
Minnesota?
What have you seen from the Eagles that makes them look like anything other than a top 10 draft pick team?
Nothing. And they just put Gertz on IR as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. So I was just, it's funny, Keith. Well, not funny for you, but the Seahawks 2020 regular season schedule prediction sheet. I was just kind of looking at that and looking at our win-loss predictions, and I noticed you opened up the Seahawks with a loss, and then you've got another loss coming up against the Vikings. I'm just wondering how you feel, not only as a person, but as a predictor of a team that you follow literally full time. How you can be so wrong.
I feel I feel great about it. I feel outstanding about it, because there's one thing about when you try and do an honest prediction and not a homer prediction, and therefore you admit the team's faults, and you say, oh, they're probably going to lose a few games here and there, and then they prove you're wrong and are better. You just go, I feel great about it. Like I am so happy that I'm wrong, and I don't care.
Good answer. That's a great answer. Yeah. I was mostly kidding.
Mostly.
Well, it is lining up. I mean, it's funny when we talked about in the prediction show, and we were really going through every opponent, and I was, honestly,
you had the team going 5-0 to start.
I had the team opening 5-0, and I was trying to be as honest and thorough as I could on being realistic with that. And looking at our roster, I was trying to figure out like where the holes were and stuff. And it pretty well lines up with kind of what I was thinking. The offense was going to be really good, in fact, improved. And then the defense, I thought, would be improved enough to make some of these wins, easier, quote unquote. Now, it hasn't turned out that way yet. But it is interesting that they do have an opportunity here. I think the floor is close to 12 wins. I'm just looking at the team, the way it's constructed, the schedule now.
It helps that their schedule, because if you look at they play the AFC East, the NFC East, Atlanta, and Minnesota. Those are the non-conference, right? The NFC East is by far the worst division in football, and they're just
the only thing that I wish
awful.
Is that we played the 49ers earlier than we do. November 1st is the first game.
Yeah, it would be nice if we played them now when they're
exactly,
because they're not a good football team with all these injuries, and they're gonna get Richard Sherman back, and they're gonna get Jimmy Garoppolo back, and they're gonna get George Kittle back, and when they get those guys back, they're gonna be a good team again.
Yes.
But they're missing their best players, and so therefore they're not. And so it would be great if we could play them now.
Yeah.
But you know what? Yeah. You look at that schedule with those 10 games, the 10 non-division games, and who scares you out of all of that?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Buffalo and New England are the only two good teams.
I'm literally thinking that I might want to revise my win-loss total.
Yeah.
Because you could easily see 13 wins now. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't so... if it wasn't so unrealistic to predict like 14, you could easily show 14 wins on here if you can get by our division games. Because then you've just got the Bills to worry about, and you've got the 49ers game at the very end, maybe. And those are the two games that would kind of pause you for a minute. Maybe the Cardinals.
Yeah.
I'm not going to write those guys off completely yet. It's just too dynamic of an offense there. But
I wouldn't write them off. Yeah, they had.
Russell Wilson could outscore anybody, though. So it's just a matter of the defense coming up with a few stops.
Or a few turnovers, which is what they've done so far.
And that's the key right there. That's the key, I think, to the entire season and maybe getting to the Super Bowl is, can the Seahawks create turnovers in order to make up for some of the deficiencies that they've got overall in their defense. All right. Should we get out of here?
I think we should get out of here. I think we're well into this show, and we're at like an hour and a half. So, yeah, if you're still listening, thank you for sticking with it. It's been a long show, but let's do it.
Yeah. Follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all of the shows. Subscribe on your favorite podcast apps, and that way you get your show into the feed every week, and also on YouTube as well. We've got a YouTube channel. It's kind of a static scrolling picture thing for now, and maybe we'll get some live stuff up there at some point. So subscribe now and be rewarded later. How about that? All right. Until next time, Keith. Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Phil is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.